Hello folks. In this video we'll show how the iron horse transformed transportation in Chase County, Kansas. The steam engine, as the iron horse was known, altered travel and commerce. With the completion of the railroad to Cottonwood Falls in March 1871, thousands of migrants began arriving by train to build new homes on the prairie. In this video, we'll identify some of the individuals most involved with railroad construction and their initiatives. Our story begins during the Civil War, after Kansas entered the Union as a free state. To encourage settlement in unsettled areas of the Midwest, Congress passed the Homestead Act in 1862. Settlers could claim up to 160 acres of public lands. They gained legal title by living on the land for 5 years and producing crops. Civil War veterans could obtain even more land. The first settlers had arrived in what was to become Chase County in the late 1850s. They came by horse and wagon from eastern states where railroads had enabled travel and trade. Understanding that rail transportation was a key to the region's development and settlement, the Kansas Territorial Legislature had granted charters for 45 new railroads. These plans sprouted like mushrooms in the soil after a summer rain. Some were speculative, some quite sincere. Many reflected the aspirations of local communities to prosper as centers of business activity. The Atchison and Topeka, later renamed the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, was one that overcame formidable startup obstacles. Commonly known as the Santa Fe Line, it transformed life in central and western Kansas. In 1859, before the Civil War began, a young Topeka lawyer, Cyrus K. Holliday, who had some railroad experience in Pennsylvania, organized the Atchison and Topeka Railway. His enterprise languished during the war until Holliday and his friends found Eastern financial support and a construction firm. One of the railroad's early officers was Samuel N. Wood, a Quaker abolitionist from Ohio. He had migrated to Kansas, battled to make Kansas a free state, and become a leader in the legislature. The group persuaded U.S. Senator Samuel Pomeroy to sponsor legislation in Congress, giving the state of Kansas thousands of acres of public lands for railroad construction. President Abraham Lincoln signed this legislation in March 1863 during the Civil War. These federal lands would be earmarked for constructing a rail line from Topeka to the Colorado border in the direction of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and for building another from Leavenworth to the state's southern boundary, including a link from Lawrence to Emporia. The result was that railroads obtained ownership of about 25% of the land in Chase County. They attempted with extravagant promotional claims to attract and sell these lands to arriving settlers. The Santa Fe would sell its land for an average price of $3.75 per acre, or about $109 in today's prices. Little was done to build the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad until after the Civil War. Construction depended on attracting Eastern capital, selling public lands, and obtaining additional funds from bonds issued by local governments, as well as finding an experienced construction firm. What route should be chosen? Sam Wood, an official of the Santa Fe and by then a newspaper publisher in Council Grove, pushed for a route running westward from Topeka to Council Grove. Then it would follow the old Santa Fe Trail to New Mexico. Residents of Emporia, led by Charles Eskridge, a prominent businessman and future lieutenant governor of Kansas, pressed for a different route. They wanted one that ran southward to Emporia, then westward through the Cottonwood and Arkansas valleys. Ultimately, the railroad chose the Emporia route, expecting to prosper from shipments of coal and cattle. Coal had been discovered near Carbondale in Osage County, and the Santa Fe hoped to break into the Texas cattle trade. Since 1867, Texas cattlemen had been driving herds of longhorns northward along the Chisholm Trail to Abilene, for shipment then on the Kansas Pacific Railroad. After the Santa Fe made its route selection, residents of Council Grove would accuse Sam Wood of betraying their interests. He would relocate to Chase County, where he and his family had additional land holdings. Let's focus on the Santa Fe's expansion through Chase County. Despite initial startup problems, the Santa Fe succeeded in obtaining money from local governments along the proposed route, south and westward from Topeka. In August 1870, Chase County residents approved, by a margin of 35 votes, the county subscribing $125,000 in purchases of railroad stock by selling county bonds. In return, the Santa Fe was required to construct a depot within a half-mile of Cottonwood Falls and to cross the Cottonwood River in Falls Township. The railroad was also to build depots near Toledo, Middle Creek, and Cedar Point. Averaging a mile a day, the Santa Fe Construction Company made rapid progress through Lyon and Chase counties in 1870 and 1871. Thomas J. Peter, an engineer from Cincinnati, supervised the railroad's construction with his capable assistant, Albert Robinson. Robinson built some 5,000 miles of track during his career with the Santa Fe and the Mexican Central Railroads. Peter, who did not smoke or drink, was renowned for his colorful vocabulary and for carrying engineering data in his head. In its rush to reach the Kansas western boundary, before its charter expired in early 1873, the Santa Fe chose not to build bridges across the Cottonwood River to reach Cottonwood Falls. Instead, it placed a train stop a mile north of the river in a largely unsettled area and called it Cottonwood Station. Residents of Cottonwood Falls considered this a violation of the terms that voters had approved when they voted bonds for railroad construction. In particular, Sam Wood was outraged. He had wanted the depot near his own home, south of Cottonwood Falls, where he owned substantial land. The Central Kansas Index, a newspaper at that time published in Cottonwood Falls, complained, quote, "The Santa Fe has broken faith with every pledge made to Chase County. Their determination is now to bleed us. They are not the only railroad builders in the world. Had we our way, not a dollar or a foot of land should be given that road in Chase County." The county commissioners agreed and did not issue the bonds. Despite some local grumbling, the Santa Fe arrived in March 1871. At that time, Cottonwood Falls was a sleepy little farming town with a lot of vacant lots. One visitor from Ohio described Cottonwood Falls this way: The town looks a great deal like some old rickety farm, where the owner is too indolent to mend up the fences as they grow old. Soon the Iron Horse invigorated Cottonwood Falls, as it did other Kansas towns. Soon freighters crowded the streets, and the hotels filled every night. Cottonwood Falls doubled in population in 9 months after the railroad arrived, and migrants crammed trains passing through the county. Promoter Sam Wood hailed Cottonwood Falls' future as the future metropolis of Kansas, with a glorious future. He touted Chase County land sales to prospective new settlers. In his advertising, he claimed Chase County was, quote, the best watered county in Kansas. He said it had the best valley lands in the world, available, of course, through him for $10 to $25 per acre. Tom, could you tell us a little about your relatives who arrived in this area by train?
February of 1879, my great-grandparents came out here from Pennsylvania, Erie County, Pennsylvania, and got off here in Strong, or at that time Cottonwood Station, and they ended up settling out towards the Wansview home state area later on. And then my wife's family actually came into Council Grove in 1875. So there's just the railroads were moving through here pretty fast at that point in time.
And large numbers of migrants who came by train, and the train accelerated the population, multiplied the population.
Yeah, the Santa Fe, I know from a little research I've done on family, is they'd actually send agents to Europe and recruit people to come from Europe to settle out here, and they really concentrated on the German Russians and the Mennonites, because the Ukraine area, what's currently Ukraine, they called it South Rusland back then, was very similar. And that's where our wheat came from. Actually, our turkey red wheat came in from that part of the country. But there was a huge influx in the late 1870s.
Visitors from abroad were impressed with the county's prospects. The Field, the country gentleman's newspaper, published in London, observed, Chase County has beautiful land. It furnishes good ranges for cattle. Chase County editors continued to boost the benefits of railroad construction during the boom years of the 1870s and 1880s, as did the leaders of other small towns with oversized aspirations. In December 1886, the Strong City Independent predicted a bright future within a year, with Santa Fe trains running through the county from Chicago to San Diego and Mexico City. Also, another railroad, the Chicago, Kansas and Western Line, an affiliate of the Santa Fe, would connect Abilene to Galveston, Texas. They would ensure us an outlet for our stone, cattle, and agricultural products, unsurpassed by any other point upon the face of the globe. The paper crowed that Strong City would be the greatest railway center in the state. No one boosted railroad expansion more enthusiastically than William Morgan, the publisher of the Chase County Leader. In early 1887, he celebrated the county's railroad boom. 4 new railroads are coming, he said. All roads once led to Rome. Soon all railroads will lead to Cottonwood Falls and make Rome howl with envy and mortification. As it turned out, all but one of these ventures, the Chicago, Kansas, and Western, which went along Diamond Creek, failed in a difficult economic environment. Several were paper railroads boosted by smooth-talking speculators who hoped to sell out to established railroads. More about paper railroads in another video. Although Chase County residents sought competition for the Santa Fe to keep down freight rates, they remained tied to this one railroad. The Santa Fe did speed the development of the county. It created towns in sparsely settled areas along the Cottonwood River from Emporia to Florence. It built depots, and it often named the depots for railroad officials, as happened across Kansas. Laying track westward from Emporia in 1871, it built a depot and laid out a town near Toledo. The railroad named it Safford for Judge Jacob Safford, the Santa Fe's first attorney, who later became a Kansas Supreme Court justice. They established a town north of Cottonwood Falls and called it Cottonwood Station. Residents of that town later voted to change the name to Strong City, honoring William Barstow Strong, then the superintendent and soon the president of the Santa Fe. Some of the enterprising citizens apparently thought Strong would reward the town handsomely with a public library. This did not happen. West of Cottonwood Station, the railroad constructed a depot near where Middle Creek entered the Cottonwood River and designated it Elmdale for the elm trees in the area. Continuing westward, the Santa Fe built a station on Henry L. Hunt's property called Hunt Station and later renamed it Crawfordsville. Hunt, chairman of the Chase County Commissioners, had, with Sam Wood, promoted several railroad construction schemes. In 1884, the Santa Fe changed the Crawfordsville name to Clements, honoring Harry Cornelius Clements, the railroad's English-born auditor who worked closely with President Strong. 20 miles west of Strong City, near Cedar Point, the Santa Fe placed another station on the north side of the Cottonwood River. It was mistakenly named Cedar Grove, but later changed to Cedar Point. Santa Fe President William Strong is remembered for building rapidly a vast rail network from Chicago to California in the 1880s. Unfortunately for Strong, his ambitious reach exceeded the Santa Fe's financial grasp. Under his leadership, the Santa Fe grew from 800 miles of track in Kansas to a line from Chicago to the West Coast with nearly 7,000 miles of track. Rapid expansion and construction of branch lines increased the railroad's debt. Excessive debt, fluctuations in rail traffic due to crop failures, and then rate wars with competitors led to bankruptcy for the Santa Fe in 1889. Strong was replaced as the chief executive. During Strong's leadership, the Santa Fe faced serious competitive challenges from other railroads. New York financier Jay Gould had taken over the Missouri Pacific, a simple line from St. Louis to Kansas City, and made it the nucleus of a complex system serving the Southwest and the cattle trade. It presented a threat to the Santa Fe's dominance of the cattle trade. One of the smaller railroads that Gould integrated into his system was the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas, the so-called Katy Line, which had been established as the Union Pacific Southern Branch. After the Civil War, the federal government wanted to connect military posts in the West, from Fort Riley near Manhattan to posts in Indian Territory and along the Gulf Coast. As a result, the Katy obtained government lands in alternate sections through the Neosho Valley that overlapped portions of Chase County. Concerned about competition from other railroads in Kansas, the Santa Fe constructed several branch lines in the mid-1880s using affiliates. One was a branch from the main line at Eleanor, east of Strong City, to Bazaar along the South Fork to facilitate cattle shipments. This opened in 1887. Roland Haney has a perspective on the changes it brought to Chase County and Cottonwood Falls. Roland, how did you happen to get interested in the railroads of Chase County?
I first found out about the train that came through into Cottonwood Falls across the river bridge and some of the local businesses it had served, and that it had gone out east of town. And so I thought, well, this might be interesting to research. When the Santa Fe Railroad did cross the Cottonwood River south of Strong City, it provided a shipping and receiving point for at least 2 local businesses, a lumber yard and a grain elevator in Cottonwood Falls. The construction for this branch line service began at a Y in Strong City in 1887. The rail line continued a short distance south before heading in an east direction across Buck Creek. It stayed behind the river and eventually wound its way in a southwesterly direction, going to what became Gladstone. From there, it continued on to the southwest and found a prime location for the town of Bazaar, which had become a large shipping and receiving point for cattle in the Flint Hills.
Ranchers along the South Fork, like Captain Henry Bradley, had long sought a railroad extending to Matfield Green and Butler County. But the Santa Fe, with routes going south from Emporia and Florence, was uninterested in a line from Cottonwood Falls to Matfield Green and Butler County. According to the Santa Fe's General Superintendent C.F. Morse, our people in Boston, meaning the stockholders, were opposed to it. In the early 20th century, another competitor sought this route. In 1901, Arthur E. Stillwell, the visionary former owner of the Kansas City Southern Railway, proposed to build the Kansas City, Mexico, and Orient Railway from outside Kansas City to Emporia and Cottonwood Falls, then to El Dorado and Wichita. He hoped to link Kansas City by rail with a Mexican port on the Gulf of California, thereby bringing Kansas closer to China, the Indies, and Australia and New Zealand than existing routes to the west coast of America. Stillwell's dream would fail because of the Mexican Revolution and the shortage of Dutch and European investment capital during World War I that were needed to complete the project. In Chase County, the Orient obtained land leases from Eleanor to Matfield Green and began grading its track in 1905 and 1906, but the project was never completed. The Santa Fe, desiring to shorten its route from El Dorado to Emporia, and thus to facilitate shipments from the West Coast, rose to the challenge. In 1922, it gained permission from government regulators to extend its line from Bazaar to Matfield Green, Cassaday, and El Dorado. As a result, rail service came to Matfield Green for the first time in 1924, linking that isolated cattle town with the outside world. Matfield Green celebrated its overdue good fortune with a parade, airplane daredevils, a rodeo with bucking broncos, and watermelon eating contest involving the railroad workers. Placards advertising the event blared, "See Matfield Green and die. Matfield Green, the last great cattle town without a railroad, after waiting half a century, has realized her dreams and has a railroad." Matfield Green in the old days was a wild place, like other storied cow towns in the West. Wayne Rogler, a longtime resident, reportedly said that he had counted 17 died-with-boots-on killings around Matfield. Another branch line was completed in 1887 by a Santa Fe affiliate, the Chicago, Kansas, and Western. It opened a rail connection from Gladstone near Bazaar that extended to Cottonwood Falls and Strong City, and then up Diamond Creek toward Abilene. It terminated in Superior, Nebraska. The president of this railroad was Joab Mulvane, an enterprising Topeka businessman who worked closely with Santa Fe President William Strong. Mulvane built 900 miles of branch lines for the Santa Fe in Kansas and later acquired a 12,000-acre ranch in Chase County near Heimer, the famous Mulvane Ranch. Chase County voters approved $80,000 in bonds to purchase stock in this enterprise, provided it was completed by June 1, 1887. Voters also insisted that the railroad build passenger and freight depots in Cottonwood Falls, as well as a division terminus. The railroad complied, but county commissioners quibbled. They refused to sign the bonds, claiming there were procedural errors. After extensive litigation, the Kansas Supreme Court ordered Chase County to sign the bonds, and the commissioners did. It is worth noting that among the counties in the Flint Hills region, Chase County provided the smallest amount of public funds to railroads, only $85,000. Lyon County provided the most, $436,000, followed by Butler, $380,000, Marion, $373,000, Greenwood, $303,000, Morris County, $297,000, and Wabaunsee, $241,000. A prominent and popular figure in the railroad history of Chase County was Jim Hurley. As a boy, he arrived penniless in 1875 from Iowa and found work as an errand boy. Soon he was driving the horse-drawn bus from Strong City to Cottonwood Falls and meeting trains and picking up passengers. He took a laboring job with the Santa Fe and rose from the ground level to the top, becoming the line's superintendent in 1905. Hurley had a phenomenal memory. It was said that he knew the names of 6,000 employees. When he passed away on a foreign trip in 1910, Topeka held the largest funeral in its history, and Santa Fe employees erected a towering granite shaft in his honor. Thanks for listening, folks. We hope to have another video soon showing how the Santa Fe impacted commercial and social life in Chase County and examining the populist revolt against railroad rates in the late 19th century. A third video in this series will consider some of the speculators and swindlers who boosted paper railroads and made extravagant promises to rural taxpayers eager to obtain rail service for their counties.